Welcome, everyone. So I'll just do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to our two distinguished teachers. So a series of conversations, a series of 7 themed Sunday talks with Maverick meditation innovators Delson Armstrong and Forrest Knudsen. Forrest and Delson will delve into the neuroscience and the mystery, the practical and the philosophical in these pithy dialogues, inviting participants to submit questions beforehand, or in this case, to jump right in and ask once we get to the question and answer section. This unprecedented collaboration between two acknowledged masters in their respective fields of practice promises to open up new territory for a multidisciplinary approach to meditation. And with that introduction, we're going to have 7 talks with different themes. And today's theme will be personal and practice histories. So I'm John Monroe, and I'll be moderating this talk today. So I'll just give a quick bio. I think everyone's familiar with both, but I'll just read this for the record. So Forrest Knudsen is a meditation teacher, author, and former monk with over 3 decades of practice in Kriya Yoga. Trained in monastic tradition, Forrest later studied directly under Ashok Kumar Singh, a master in the Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage, who appointed him a Kriya guru in 2017. Forrest's teachings blend ancient yogic techniques with modern neuroscience, focusing on cultivating a low idle state to naturally calm the mind and achieve profound meditative absorption. His approachable style, detailed online courses, and insightful YouTube content have made him a trusted guide for students worldwide. And Delson Armstrong is a globally recognized meditation teacher and author, deeply rooted in the Buddhist and yogic traditions. With mastery across disciplines such as Advaita Vedanta, Kriya Yoga, and Tibetan Mahamudra, Delson has achieved profound meditative states, including Nirodha Samapatti. In 2017, he was authorized by Venerable Bhante Vimalaramsi to teach Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, or TWIM, guiding students to transformative states like the jhanas and nibbana. Delson's teachings integrate ancient practices with modern neuroscience, offering personalized instruction and accessible pathways to awakening for householders and monastics alike. So I'd just like to welcome all of you and Delson and Forrest. And apologies if those bios were far too short and far too cursive. But just to give us a bit of a flavor. So I'd like to open it up, this conversation, with, we're talking about personal and practice histories of the two of you. And so it's quite a remarkable opportunity to have the two of you in the same space and to be able to ask you questions about your experiences and how those might compare and interweave. So perhaps we might kick it off by asking each of you. I'd like to start with you, Forrest, if it's all right. What drew you to meditation, and how did that evolve into a long-time passion for you?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, John. John is in Japan, and it's 1 a.m. So he woke up at 1 a.m. to facilitate this. That's amazing. So thank you, John. And thank you, Delson, for having me here. And I think this was their idea, and I think it's beautiful. I love it. And I love this collaboration that's happening between us in these respective traditions. Very powerful combination when you can see the harmony between those two and bring them together. Very beautiful, very powerful. So love being here. I grew up with a couple stories from my mother, and she was into Buddhist meditation. She was into transcendental meditation, and she was reading Lobsang Rampa, if you remember Lobsang Rampa, and those stories. So I grew up with those stories, and then I remember something about I remember something about Lobsang Rampa, and he said, well, they took me in and they drilled into my spiritual eye. And early on, I thought, oh my God, that's great. That's amazing. And then later on, I said, oh my God, that's crazy. And then later on, further than that, I thought, well, that might actually work, because it would draw your attention so permanently to the spiritual eye that it would kind of force the issue. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's totally not a good idea, but kind of hilarious. And so I grew up with those stories. And then when I was in my mother's womb, she was having some visions. So she had Buddhist monks come to her in the form of a vision and told her to guard the golden bowl, which was her womb, kind of. And then she had a repeating vision where she saw a monk going up a stairway. And every time she had the vision, he was higher up on the stairway. And something peculiar, he had armor on. So not only was he a monk, but he was some kind of a warrior monk. And so he kept getting closer and closer to the light. And when he finally made it, I was born. And so I grew up with that kind of identification. And it was very powerful in my psychology. And I sought out meditation early on and went through a bit of a crisis, like I don't know, um, a crisis about life and what is life about and what is this all about and what is it really for? Kind of, normal teenage crisis. But instead of turning to something else, I turned to meditation. And then I found Autobiography of a Yogi and I saw Kriya Yoga, and I'm like, this is it. Because every book that I was reading, it was so, oh, just meditate on a flower opening. I thought, where's the science? I don't know. For some weird reason, I had this idea that it ought to be scientific. And then Yogananda was talking about Kriya Yoga and the science of it. I'm like, oh, poof, you sold me. I'm in. And so I went through that, and then years later found out that he had changed the Kriya. And then I later studied with Ashok, and that's when it all came together. Um, it wasn't that he had the some of the it wasn't that he had some of the scientific language that I use today, but everything that I teach, it all comes from the pointers that he gave me. He always set me in the right direction, and beautifully. So here we are.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Delson, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what got you interested in meditation in the beginning and how that developed.
Yeah. So for me, I grew up in India for the first 5 years of my life, but I wasn't really introduced to any kind of meditation until much later. We moved to the States when I was 5. I was living in New York at the time. And we had a landlord who was very friendly to me, and he had kids of his own, and I would play with his kids when I was 5 or 6. And he had a huge video library collection, and he would let me borrow his videos, like different cartoons and sci-fi movies and things like that. And this is the first time I was introduced to Star Wars, and I saw the first episode, well, episode 4 now, A New Hope, the original Star Wars, and then Empire Strikes Back. And he was such a big fan, so he and I would be discussing all these different scenes and characters, but I never got the terms right. For example, I would call it Return of the Jedi instead of Return of the Jedi. He would always bash me on that. It's Jedi, it's Jedi. And finally I got it. But it really made a deep impression on me because it wasn't just the sci-fi aspect, it was the mystical wisdom that was there, the wisdom of Master Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I said, I wonder if it's possible to do something like this, because I grew up in a household where everything was very open. I grew up Catholic, and I was an altar boy and I played church organ for the church and all kinds of things. But it wasn't until about the age of 11 or 12 where my class was doing a study on ancient India. First time I got kind of reconnected to Indian history. Um, I was fascinated by that, Buddhism and the story of Ashoka and Mohenjo-daro and all of those things. And we had a family friend who was living with us for some time, and he did yoga, like hatha yoga. So he said, "Would you like to come try out a session with me?" I said, "Sure." It was summertime, so I was out of school and decided, why not? Let's try it. And I recall doing the poses as the instructor was showing us. And I found myself quite at ease doing them, even the harder poses like the headstand and the shoulder stand and all of these inverted poses. And I remember what a rush I felt at the end of that session. I remember feeling stoned, felt high. I was like, wow, this is just amazing. And I remember just being on cloud nine while I was in his car. He was driving us back to my place. And I said, is it possible to like repeat this experience again? And he said, well, if you're really interested, I'll give you a book. And he gave me this book, which was like a compendium of different kinds of yoga practices. And I was so fascinated by it. I just read it, every single day and tried out the poses, created my own routine. And then, it talked about like mudras and bandhas and different kinds of kriyas, not associated with Kriya Yoga, but just general kriyas. And then meditation itself. Then I went to India when I was about 13. Kind of forgot about all of that until 2 years later, where I met with this teacher um, who was a theater arts teacher, but he was also a yogi in his own way. Like he was a very fascinating character. He's still alive. He's a very fascinating character. Kind of reminds me of Dumbledore when you see him. But he and I would discuss drama, and then we would also discuss yoga, and he would teach me different kinds of pranayama, and then talk a little bit more about the philosophy of yoga, the philosophy of Vedanta and Sankhya. And he would tell me stories about his time in the Himalayas. And later on, I got expelled from that school. So after I got expelled, he said, "Let me take you to the Himalayas." So that was a time when I was suffering quite a lot. So I had a lot of things going on in my life, and I said, "Yeah, let me do that." And so I got my parents' permission and went to the Himalayas with him. And he had a book with him, Autobiography of a Yogi. He was reading that book. And so I started reading that in tandem um, while traveling through Rishikesh and Uttarakashi and meeting all these very interesting mystical people. I had a lot of, let's say, encounters very, very similar to the encounters Paramahansa Yogananda had in his book. And a lot of deja vu, a lot of different kinds of psychic faculties opening up, premonitions, uh, lots of interesting things. But that really started my journey. And, eventually I kind of voraciously read everything I could on meditation in different schools of meditation. And, the rest is history. I started studying into Tibetan Buddhism, got initiated into Kriya Yoga in different lineages, and then eventually I found myself practicing TWIM, and here we are.
Great, thank you very much. I sort of hear this theme in both your accounts of early in their career to be sort of encountering the struggle and the difficulty and words like crisis and suffering and so on. So, Forrest, I'm curious, in your case, I think, many people come to the spiritual work from a place of, oh, this is not working, or there's something missing, or that kind of thing. So I'm curious, in your case, if you could just speak to, let's say, I was a young person who was experiencing a kind of spiritual crisis of some kind, and how meeting the spiritual practices helped you, and any takeaways you might have from that that might be helpful for people.
Yeah, wow, that's okay. So going all the way back in my teenage years, I was an introvert and raised didn't really have a father figure. Um, my Never met my natural father, so I didn't have a real good, solid father figure. I had my grandfather, who was amazing, so he kind of filled the void. And so I've kind of collected father figures over the years, which has been wonderful. So now I've got like 16 fathers, which I collected all by myself, and love all of my teachers. And so I was kind of a mama's boy and an introvert, which is a horrible mix in northern Idaho. And all these boys were raised to be boys, and good for them. And I just didn't fit with that, so I was very introverted anyway. And I remember being in the third grade and daydreaming. I was actually entering into the right brain, and I've got these early memories that. So I was in my. This is kind of funny. I was in my grandparents' home, and my grandmother asked me a question, and I was not quick enough to answer her, because what I was doing is I would take English and then I would translate it into this language that I was using, which was pictures and energy and emotion, which was this liquid language. And I would translate it, and then I would have my answer easily, and then I would have to translate it back into English. It would take a few minutes for a simple question. And my grandma walked away after the answer, and she started speaking with some of my family, and she goes, maybe we should test Forrest. I think there's something wrong with him. And I'm like, and I saw this as a child, and I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta change something. And so I made the conscious choice to switch to thinking in English, which is the left brain, So, so it's just to say, I was extremely introverted, and I would sit in class and just look out at the trees and just space into, a little bit of expansion, just childish expansion, daydreaming. And so yeah, so all of that put me in a wonderful social crisis after social crisis, especially wanting to be a part of the social world around me, and I just couldn't find my way into it. I had friendships, but it was I think that was a very confusing time. And then I found Ken Keyes Jr. And he wrote a couple books, a couple of self-help books, and it was mostly affirmation. So I started using affirmation. That was wonderful. And then I used affirmation for prayer. So I kind of mixed the Ken Keyes Jr. with prayer, and that worked wonderful. So the neighbor's cat was had gotten chewed up by some local coyotes and came limping back home, and they thought, oh, it's going to die for sure. And I went home and I prayed for the cat, and cat was just fine the next day, lived through the night. They didn't expect it to live through the night, and turned out to be just fine. And that kind of convinced me that, oh, wow, this kind of works. Prayer works. Affirmation works. And it certainly worked. The affirmation worked wonderfully in myself, that I could change what I thought. I could change my state. And then I found meditation, and I started doing the meditations. Funny enough, the very first time I did the Hong Sa technique, I did it perfectly, and I controlled my breath, which put me into HRV resonance. So the very first time I used Hong Sa, I was doing HRV resonance and it was glorious. And I'm like, this is so great. I better go back and read the instructions again. And then I reread the instructions, and the instructions told me, don't control your breath. I'm like, oh, I've done it all wrong. And then I could never figure out how I got that early success. It took me years and years and years to understand how that actually worked with HRV resonance. But so did I talk enough about the angst? Yeah, it was just really bad. It was, I had no social I didn't know how to be, um, I didn't understand how the guys worked. And so it was really difficult. I went through a very long journey through martial arts, which I love. And especially the soft internal martial arts, absolutely adore them. And I think there's a lot of parallels. We were just talking the other day that there's, a lot of parallels between the Aiki mind arts of martial arts, and you might see that some of that in Japan there, John, and some of a lot of the principles of Kriya Yoga or yoga in general. And so I went through a long journey with martial arts and learning about the guy energy, and which I just didn't understand. It took me a long time, but so thankful to go through all of that. And it drove me towards meditation. And then I went into the ashram and I found out what that was all about. And so it's been a crazy journey. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very, very fascinating. I mean, living in Japan, I can really resonate with the idea of having an internal world of a certain, way of framing the world and communicating with myself, and then how that translates to the outer world. And also just this idea of, our own lived experience versus what the world is telling us, and how we should be experiencing it and how we should be expressing ourselves. I think that's a really interesting thing that probably a lot of people who get into spirituality experience in their own ways. Yeah, yeah. Delson, I'm wondering if you on your Jedi quest, if you encountered those kinds of challenges.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had enough angst for more than one lifetime for sure. I as I said, I grew up in India the first 5 years of my life, and I was very much like Forrest, a mama's boy. My dad had already moved to the U.S., so the first 5 years, well, let's say first 3 year, from the ages of 2 to 5, he wasn't around because he was, busy with work in the U.S., and he finally brought us to the U.S. after my mother's mom passed away. And that was an interesting experience because I was very close to my grandmother. We had a very sort of frenemy kind of relationship. She and I would tag along with her to all of her different errands and marketplaces, and, be tugging at her sari, and then she would take me to the zoo, and buy me ice cream and all of this. But the one time we were enemies was during breakfast time before going to school, because she would make this rich bowl of porridge, and with just like ghee and fruits and nuts, and just make it like extremely rich. And she would make sure that I would finish that bowl. And so there would be a power dynamic. I'd be like, no, I can't do anymore. And she was like, one more bite, one more bite. And so that was the only time we were enemies. And I was traumatized after that. I don't like porridge. Please do not give me a bowl of porridge. Okay. Uh, so, I had a very close relationship with her. But she passed away when I was about just about after the age of 5. And I recall, like, I didn't really understand what was going on. The concept of death was new to me, but that was my first introduction to death in this life. And I remember seeing her corpse in the casket, and thinking, what's going on? I saw my mother crying, I saw our relatives crying, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And then they closed the casket, and they They lowered it into the ground, and I realized, oh, this is the last time I'm going to see her. But I still recall not feeling any kind of sadness, just a curiosity of like, what happened to her? What is this thing that happened to her? And then I had this later on this realization that of what death is. And then I had my own encounter with death at the age of about 8 or 9, where um, summertime we were playing on the street, and a car hit me, and it kind of like just flung me down the road on the asphalt, and I basically landed with like, just as soon as I landed, like everything just went black and then white, and then I had a near death experience basically. And I remember coming back, and my friends saw me. They picked me up. They were like scared. What's going on? I looked around, and I remember saying to them, "None of this is real. You aren't real. You aren't real. None of this is real." It was like, this is all just a dream. And I remember like feeling like I was still out of my body at that point. Like I was still trying to come into my body. And then as soon as my mother came, I realized, oh, something traumatic happened, because I started crying, and I realized, oh, I just got hit by a car. And so luckily it was not too bad. They did do some tests and checked on me and everything, but it was fine. But that left a real impression on me. Like, what does that mean? Like, where did I go? What was that whole process? I was trying to figure that out. But it kind of got lodged deep in my subconscious later on, because I got busy with school, got busy with other things. And then we had our own things in life, like with my family, where we left India in 2002 or 2003, because we lived in New York at the time. So 9/11 had happened, and I remember that it was Tuesday morning. And I remember all of these kids were being called out one by one from the class, and we didn't really make anything out of it. But then by the time we were at recess, I was called into the principal's office, and I saw my mom crying. And she said, I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Get in the car. I'll tell you." My sister was there. She was quite young, probably about, yeah, she just turned 3 at that time. And then she told me, the Twin Towers have been hit. And my father worked there at the Twin Towers. So for me as a child, it was like, whoa, what does that mean? And all of these things came up in my head, like, if he's gone, now what? And all of that. And so we tried reaching him, couldn't reach him. We went home, and luckily, when we got home, we saw him on the sofa watching TV, watching the news, and there was such relief there. And I remember crying and hugging him, and we said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, I was on my way, but our meeting got canceled, and I was late anyway, so I figured I'd just come back." And luckily, he was able to come back. But we could see the towers burning from our kitchen window, and it was a very harrowing experience. But then what happened is, the next couple of days, like school was off, and the next couple of days, everybody started looking at me differently. My circle of friends started looking at me differently. Why? Because of my skin color. And they thought that somehow I was different, and so I now became their target of bullying, and I was bullied for quite some time. I didn't react. I didn't know how to react, but that left quite an impression on me about like, what is this world and where have we gotten to? I was inspired by Gandhi. I was inspired by Martin Luther King. I used to read a lot when I was 5 or 6. Actually, there used to be this reading program from the library, a summer reading program where for every 10 books that you read, you got a free pizza at Pizza Hut. You can imagine, I read 60 books that summer. So so I read a lot, and I was very inspired by the biographies of these people, like Martin Luther King and Gandhi. I figured, maybe nonviolence is the way, and I just became non-reactive to their bullying. But obviously, it had a psychological effect on me, and I didn't feel accepted. We moved to India, and there I was staying at an international school. It was a boarding school, so it was sort of like a modern day Hogwarts. It had its own like houses based on the elements. So I was in air house, and we had huge 30-acre campus, and it was a wonderful time. At the same time, again, I wasn't accepted because I was the foreign Indian, and nobody really could understand where I was coming from. So all my life, or at least my teenage life, I've always felt betrayed by friends or unaccepted. And, things weren't that great in school. I was a good student. I did really well in class, but socially it was quite difficult. And then I got expelled, and that was a whole other ordeal that, that caused me to think about like academics and life in general. And that led me on my spiritual quest.
Thank you, Delson. In hearing this, I remember, as a young boy, seeing spiritual teachers and reading about them and so on, and thinking, wow, it must be so easy for them. They just come into life and they know exactly what they want to be doing with their lives, and they've got it all figured out. And if only I could, I'd had that luck to come in with that clarity. And so it's kind of inspiring to hear, those challenges that both of you have faced. I'm curious, Forrest, for you, you get all this sort of pushback from life, and then at some point though, your practice and your engaging with life in the way you have, um, was there a point when you felt like, actually, you know what, I'm kind of right, when everyone's telling you to be different? Is there a point when you felt, I'm actually going to go my own way, I actually feel like I should listen to myself rather than others?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. Um, I think, well, I read the autobiography of a yogi and I'm like, this makes sense. Forget everything else. And I started thinking that I would become a monastic. And so I didn't, I barely cared about school. I managed to finish my high school only because I went to Los Angeles and the monks said, well, you had to finish high school. Jesus. And so I went back and I finished high school, and I managed to finish half a year early, which was wonderful. And then, but yeah, I really didn't care about anything at that point. I was just very interested in pursuing the spiritual life. And then, but I remember, so that was kind of wonderful. I remember that time that I had had so many social problems, things that I just couldn't figure out. I just couldn't integrate myself with the kids. And um, I remember the pizza offering from the book club. That was great. What a great memory. And so I entered into this state where I didn't care about anything, and it was really wonderful because all of the social anxiety and all of my social problems evaporated. It was beautiful. And I actually had a certain kind of acceptance because I just didn't care what other people thought. And so it's a funny thing. People will just automatically accept you when you're that confident in yourself, right? And so, in a very strange way, everything that I had wanted socially just came very easily once I didn't care anymore. So, and then I went to the ashram and I started this whole process again of wanting acceptance. And so I remember being in the ashram going, wait a minute, I had this solved. What the hell happened? And so I went through the same process again where I had to stop caring what the monks thought of me. And I went after that. I realized that I'd lost something, that I was doing an old program, running this old program again of, oh my God, I got to get somebody's acceptance. Oh my God, somebody has to like me. And that was just manic and crazy. And I had to get rid of that again. And did I do it again? I want to say that I did it again, that I left the ashram and then I started doing it again. I think I had to not so much, but definitely I think I went through it a little bit a third time. And when there was a point in my spiritual life that I found out some things about some of my spiritual heroes. I went through a process when I was in the ashram. I remember there was a talk by Anandamoy, and he kept talking about how they had whitewashed Jesus. That when you take out the trials that a spiritual teacher goes through and you whitewash them and you say, oh, they never had any problems, well, then you take away the possibility to learn from that person, because as a teacher, their struggles become your struggles, and you can understand what they reflect your struggles, right? And so you can learn, oh my God, this person actually made it out of this maze of their own mind. And so he was commenting on how valuable that was, and he was alluding that they were whitewashing, that the organization was busy whitewashing Yogananda. And yeah, so that really struck me. And so I was going through a time in the ashram where I thought, well, what if I'm putting everybody up on a pedestal and so I can't learn from them? And I started going through the books of the saints. I was reading Saint Francis. I was reading Saint Teresa of Avila. I was reading Saint Teresa of Lisieux. And I started going through all of those books. And I started actively looking for their flaws. And I realized they all had a lot of flaws. And it was kind of wonderful that there was a beauty in the humanity and understanding we're all just human. We're all just struggling. We're all just trying to find our way out of this thing. And that there are people that have success with that. So, yeah, I think that's extremely worthwhile.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't help in listening to you both speak, but think of the hero's journey and the monomyth and Joseph Campbell, and seeing that sort of a template that seems to play out in each of our lives,
Yeah.
each in a unique way. That's so. Was there like a moment when you felt like uh, I guess you're saying that it happens in cycles, is that right? That you would sort of cycle through these, my view, then the world view, then my view, then the world view kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, there was a time I was studying with Ashok, and I learned some things about I almost forgot this part. There was some spiritual heroes, and I found out there was a big mess that had been covered up for years and years of what they were doing. And at that moment, I realized there's this quote from Steve Jobs, and he's talking about how when you realize that the people that made all the things that we are using today, that they were no different from you, and that you can go out and you can make things and you can make the world better by your creativity and your action. It's a beautiful, beautiful quote. And that's kind of what clicked inside of me when I stopped hero worshiping all these other people. And I realized, no, they're just human, and we all have this capacity to understand. And so something happened inside of me. It just kind of clicked, and I really started pulling apart. I'd been doing it for years, but at that point, it's like somebody took the chains off of me, and I just really ripped apart Kriya to see what was behind the screen. And that's when I really started understanding. And also, it kind of an Venn diagram that came together with my own Kriya practice under Ashok, and it just blossomed, and it allowed for a lot of insight into how Kriya was actually working. And I think that's something that is very valuable. So I see my students, the pace that I was going was like a snail, like a dogged snail that will not give up. And then I give the inside understandings to my students, and they just go, "Achoo." It's just crazy. It's so amazing. So yeah, all of that comes from understanding how it actually works, and yeah, getting past that all of that, getting past all that anxiety, social anxiety, letting go of all of that, and just wow, being on the hero's journey. That's a beautiful reference. Becoming the Jedi, Delson, becoming the Jedi. Beautiful. I love that. I loved Star Wars. It That was the hero's journey. That was all based on Campbell, and that's based
Yeah.
on the story that all of these myths. Now there's another author. He wrote Body of Myth, and when you get into that, it's actually even more profound than Joseph. I love Joseph Campbell, but the Body of Myth, it nails it straight down to yoga, that all of these myths are talking about meditation. So Mount Olympus, that is the yogi meditating, ascending into the heavenly realms, talking to the gods. This is what happens in meditation. And so all of those old myths are actually meditation myths. And when you frame it like that, you realize, oh my God, the entire hero's journey is this path that all of us here are walking is the hero's journey, the true hero's journey, like the core of the core. So we can see somebody and they can be successful in life, and we can go, oh, they followed the hero's journey and they won. Yes, that's great. That's all of that is wonderful. And the skills and the knowledge and the knowing that it gives you, it's supposed to feed your internal hero's journey, which is the true journey, right? So that's kind of beautiful. So everybody here, they're on that journey.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I have this wonderful kind of cartoon that somebody made that shows the hero's journey, and it's all scenes from movies. So you've got Luke, you know, encountering his father, and you've got Alice in Wonderland. You've got all these different people who are sort of encountering that, and I know, Dawson, that really resonates with you too. So I wonder if there's some point on the hero's journey, Dawson, that you where you realize that, oh, actually I'm on a quest.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, I think when I look back on my life, it has been very much that hero's journey. Like I think for me, the call to action, I had a couple of calls to action. One was like going into the other world with that particular near-death experience, and then there was another point where, you know, it was again 9/11, and then post 9/11, and then going to school in India, and then kind of like reintegrating into that culture and what that's like. Because being away from India for so long, and then being like sort of in the culture of United States and being basically all American, and then coming back to India, where it's, I don't know how many of you have been to India, but it is a wild trip. I mean, I would definitely suggest you guys go at some point. It is like it's an assault on all the senses, and it's a new world. For me, it was like entering into a new world, you know. You see, like there's no there's like um you know, like stop signs or traffic signs are just suggestions. You know, they're not laws. You can decide when you want to go and how you want to go. And it's just this controlled chaos that happens, you know, and you have cows, and cows are the masters of the road. You do not want to mess with them. Everybody goes around the cow, you know, and it's just like the smells and the sights and the sounds and the color. It's just like this five-dimensional, hyper realistic sort of thing. And it was so like overwhelming. Like it was a really a new world for me. And then, you know, meeting with the people and understanding them. And I had my own sort of, when you talk about hero's journey, you know, my own mentors that were there throughout that process. I was always looking for somebody to guide me, you know, in the same way that you would look at, for example, in Autobiography of Yogi, Yogananda is always looking for his particular guru, and he goes to different people and, you know, and learns from them. But finally um, he meets with Yukteswar, Sri Yukteswar. Um, but you know, my expulsion from school was another thing. It was kicking out from that world and going into a different world where I was living in Mumbai. And Mumbai, I was living at the time, we have these things called chawls. They're sort of like these very small self-contained houses or apartments. And it's just one room apartments where 7 or 8 people are living together. And you have to share the bathroom with like 50 other people. So it's just like so many different like experiences I've had in life where I've seen the best of the best, and I've seen sort of like some of the craziest things, and I've experienced some of the lows of life in terms of like how you can live and the lifestyle of people. But there was one mentor that I had, which was this cobbler that I met in Mumbai. I was sort of this uninterested in any kind of pursuing any kind of education, very much like I don't care about high school, and I'm just gonna go wander around, meet people and learn from them, go to the library, read on books. But I happened to meet with this cobbler, and I was with my cousin. He had just torn one of his sandals, and on our way to our grandmother's place, we met a cobbler, and he was fixing his sandal, my cousin's sandal, and he looked at me, and he was listening to me talk, and I had a different accent, and so he spoke to me in English, and he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Delson." "What's yours?" And he gave me his name, and then he said, "Oh, I would love to get more understanding of where you are and where you're coming from," and because he his English wasn't that great, and he wanted to learn more English. I said, "Sure." And so I would hang out with him, and he would, and I would just be like having like these small cups of chai throughout the day while he'd be doing his work, and I'd be teaching him English. And then he later on would show me some other things. He was somebody who was clairvoyant, and he would tell me about this person and that person and this person, and this is what they're going, this is where they're going to go, and this is their journey. And I was like, "Can you show me how to do this?" And so he showed me some of the things, and he explained to me how this whole process works. And so that was one of my mentors. And of course, the original teacher who took me to the Himalayas was another one of my, Obi-Wan Kenobis. And so I've had a lot of mentors. I've had a lot of great mentors. Even when I was in San Diego, one of my mentors, he had his issues, but he was still somebody from whom I could learn generosity, who I could learn how to be confident. I Believe it or not, I was terrified of public speaking. I was terrified of talking to even just another person one on one. But it was through my experiences that, very much like how Forrest said, like, just don't care. Like, I don't really care. Like, I'm just going to go and do what I want. And people who will resonate with what I'm doing and saying will come. And those who aren't, that's okay. No big deal. They might find something else. So, I've had disillusionment with some of the spiritual ideas as well, because I've seen the other parts of where, there is the humane or human aspect to all of these things. So I too experienced seeing teachers and mentors idealizing them and putting them on pedestals, and then slowly seeing how that pedestal starts to crumble and who this person actually is, and realizing, no, there is nobody perfect in this world, and we are responsible for our own actions. We are responsible for how we uh, live in this world and how we continue to interact with people. And that was sort of like a on the ground approach to karma, realizing what karma actually is, which is, if I'm behaving a certain way, I will get a certain response. And not only externally, but internally, which means if I do something bad, immediately my mind will feel regret. And that's immediate karma. If I do something good, immediately I feel uplifted. And so that is karma right there. And so I learned on my own, like looking and observing at people, using that clairvoyance from the cobbler, reading up on all of these different people, meeting some amazing people in Mumbai who were students of Nisargadatta Maharaj and J. Krishnamurti and UG Krishnamurti students and Osho students, and I've gone on some really crazy journeys with them. So, I think like my life, when I look back on it, it's just like, how did I survive? Like, how did I make it this far already? You know, with all of the, I mean, I would go jumping from train to train. I'd be doing all kinds of crazy things, you know, and find myself in the most craziest situations. I got caught and then caught to drinking beer on the beach by the police, and one guy ran away, and he took us. This was in Mumbai. He took us to the police station, and you know, he made us stay the night at the jail cell, and you know, so like it's been an interesting adventure. You know, I mean, I cannot wait to write down these stories, and I think John, you and I are working on that anyway. But yeah, I mean, life is really so interesting. And if you guys look back on your own lives, you will see the amazing karmic lessons that that are available to you. And if you start to look at it from that lens, that life is actually a series of sort of lessons in the making, and that you can actually just observe what's going on. And if you look back on it, you'll realize that everything that has happened to you has led to this moment. And you wouldn't change a thing, because it is those very moments that brought you here and showed you the wisdom and compassion that you've developed.
Wonderful, wonderful. I have so many questions, but I just wanted to ask Forrest if you have, you know, if there's anything you'd like to say about what Delson just said.
Absolutely. You know, I really love that part where, well, I loved all of it, but there was a part where you were talking about, you know, not only I'm not just worried about, okay, I do this, I'm going to have a karmic effect, but there's actually an immediate karmic effect inside of yourself. And I really love that, because there's stories about Lahiri Mashaya. They said that he was extremely conscientious. And so he was in a shop, you know, he's in the market, and this man had, I don't know what shop it was, but he had little cards that you could take with his information. And Lahiri Mashaya took a card and he put down some pennies, you know, he put down some rupees, and they said, "Oh, sir, you don't have to do that. These are free. You can just take them." He goes, "Oh no, I have to." Because he knew if he took something from this man, maybe the man didn't appear to be extremely rich. He's taking from this little man in his little shop, and I want to give back. And if I don't give back, I am going to feel it. It's going to bother me mentally. And that's the immediate karma that Lahiri Mashai. So I'm just going to avoid all of that. I don't need that. So I'll just put down some rupees, and voila, I don't feel bad about taking his little card. And so that's the clarity that he wanted inside of himself, you know, which again, that's exactly what the Kriya is for, to clear everything out, get everything out of the way. So I thought that was beautiful. Beautiful reference.
Thank you. Sorry, I actually my computer bumped me out of the session there for a moment, and so I missed part of that. But I'll
Saw that. Yeah.
pick it up in the recording after. I hope this is one of my little belly of the whale moments here, I guess. So so I just we're coming up to the hour, and I want to open it up for questions to anyone who would like to ask. And I have an endless supply of questions myself, but I thought it might be fun. So if you'd like to drop a question in the chat, or also we could try raising hands and see how that works.
Virgil has a question.
Great. Okay. Would you like to just go ahead and read it, Delson, if you don't mind?
No, he raised his hand. Virgil, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question for Forrest. I've been doing twin practice with Delson for quite a while, and he actually recommended me some Kriya Yoga techniques. And then based on that, I went ahead and bought your book. mastering meditation. And I have a few questions regarding the HRV breathing first and foremost, because that's one of the techniques that I have incorporated in my practice. So the reason I'm doing it is to basically doing as a preparatory stage right before my meditation as a way to calm down the mind. Because what I found is that meditating in lay life with a busy schedule, it's completely different from meditating on retreats, right, where you have seclusion and all of that. And what I found is that with this is one of the few techniques that really work for me to really calm the mind, and almost like acts like a shortcut to really get the mind into a very, very still, almost like retreat day, And I have a few questions. So you said that first of all, you should make the out breath longer than the in breath. The second one was to eliminate the pauses, right? Those spaces between. Now, when I do the out breath, as I get to the end of the out breath, I can't really tell if the breath ended or there seems to be a space there. I can't figure out if there is a space or it's just that the breath gets so subtle, and I can't really tell if there is a pause right before I take the in-breath. So if you have any comment regarding that.
Sure. So wonderful, wonderful. Yes, it's skipping. So that is fantastic. That's exactly what you want. So just a little bit of control, and we control the body, and the body will sink into the HRV resonance, which would happen on a retreat very naturally, but we're kind of forcing the issue in a very nice way. It's not a strong, heavy force. It's just an easy control. And then, so your question, I'm sorry, what was your question?
So
your
there
question,
is a space that I feel
the
like
pause.
it's getting suppler and suppler and suppler. And then I can figure out if I need to wait or start the next breath sooner in order to make sure it's not a small space there.
Yeah. So you're doing just fine. And don't worry about that. So some people will they'll take out, they will put in pauses which are too much, and they will upset the HRV resonance before they have established it. And so you want to be able to get into the HRV resonance without having extreme pauses on either end when you're just learning HRV resonance. And then later, it's possible to bring together HRV resonance and a breath hold, which is blood pressure variability resonance. So we're not only affecting the heart, through the breath, we're not only affecting the heart, but we're also affecting the arteries when we're doing a breath hold. And so there's a play that's happening between those. But when we first learn, as I started teaching HRV resonance, I realized some people will put in a long pause in there somewhere and will mess up the whole process when they're trying to learn HRV resonance. So I said, okay, we take out the pauses, which is what Dr. Geverts does in the beginning when he's teaching HRV resonance. Poor John keeps popping out. There he goes. So that's why I said take out the pauses. And that's why Dr. Geverts, he takes out the pauses. But then as you are going through the HRV resonance, you might also have the tranquil breath show up. And so the tranquil breath is the body starts to freeze. So the chest will start to freeze and the breath will go down into your belly. So you'll have this automatic, deep, diaphragmatic breath. And so sometimes when you're doing the HRV resonance, you'll notice that the pause feels really good. And there's not as much impulse to breathe in again. And so when that happens, it's okay. You let go of your control and you let the tranquil breath take over. So you might be noticing some of that at the tail end, or it might be that you're just noticing, oh, the pause is not, I want the pause to be shorter. I'm worried about the pause. Don't worry about it. I think you're doing fantastic. So just make that out breath long, get into that deep state, and then start looking for the beginnings of that tranquil breath. So the chest will be frozen and the breath will go down. And I have a video where I talk about 3 levels of the tranquil breath. So the first level, the breath will actually be a little bit quick but it will be not in the chest, but down in the belly. But it might be a little bit quick. And that's actually the beginning. And it feels like, oh my God, I think I'm going backwards. But no, you're actually going into the tranquil breath because you have the freeze response. And then that breath will slow down in the diaphragmatic breath. The belly breathing will get kind of moderate. And then the belly breathing will get really slow. And you'll go, oh my God, wait a minute. Where did the breath go? And that's the disappearing of the breath. It's not disappearing. It's just a really long, tranquil breath.
Yeah, so what I found is that if I start, let's say, with the 4 and 7 counts, say, after 5 minutes, it gets like 8 and 12 or something like that. So the both in breaths and out breaths get longer.
Beautiful.
And when I was doing this with the app that you recommended, the app has actually constant, I think it's constant, right? So
yes.
but when I dropped the app, I realized that actually the rhythm changes as you go. As the body, the nervous system calms down, the breath gets longer and also softer, right?
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely. That's exactly what you want. So you're doing perfect.
And I'm gonna make another quick question because I don't want to take the space too long. So regarding the Mahamudras, also do that before right before the breathing, because I feel it really helps me relax the body. It also works great for preparatory stage. My question is, when I do the stretches while having a breath hold. And my question is, how much air cap or lung capacity should I have on the hold? Because what I felt, so the way I understand it, the Maha Mudras are meant, the main reason we're doing them is to get an internal stretch, right?
Correct.
It's not the external. The external is like the byproduct of the stretch, but the internal stretch is what leads to the relaxation of the nervous system. And when I feel the lungs too much, I have this, I feel the need to take a deep breath. That kind of puts a lot of pressure, like a lot of pressure in my lungs. So how much air should I take in?
Well, try and do it in an easy way. Don't make it strenuous. This is not, we're not world-class athletes. We're just stay-at-home yogis. And so, don't try and be aggressive. Try and be super, super nice to yourself as you're doing the stretch. So do whatever you need to do to make it easy and comfortable. And then only hold as long as is comfortable for you. So I'm stretching, and it's an internal stretch. You have it absolutely correct. And it's also the external stretch. So both of those are going to benefit you as you sit in meditation. They're going to cause this relaxation and this ease to be inside of the body that is a wonderful preparation for your practice. And so you just want to breathe in, hold the breath, and then gently stretch as far as you can. And if you feel like, okay, I'm out of my capacity of holding the breath, then just stop the stretch and then start again. And if you feel like, oh, that was kind of short, well, then just do it one more time, maybe, but never feel like, oh my God, I'm hurting myself. You never want to enter into that realm. It's just very, very easy, very, very natural. And if this is as far as I can stretch, hey, that's fine. That's as far as I can stretch. If this is as far as I can hold the breath, that's how far I can hold the breath, and that's just fine.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll just follow across the screen. So Herbert, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I'm Herbert, and I live in the UK. I'm German. So I just wanted to say I appreciate your video you did with Guru Vikinging, where you said because I watched so many videos of you all over YouTube and wherever I could find it and songs, and so I loved them all. Some were a bit difficult to understand sometimes, very intense, but I loved them all, and you always impressed me very much. And I appreciate your honesty on Guru Viking. And I watched a couple of other videos who were criticizing you and sort of what they're on about, never left at all, it's not my cup of tea. And then I got the email to participate on this call. And I didn't know Forrest at all. Never heard about him. Who's that one? And you know, I know a lot of teachers, at least from YouTube, because I'm a YouTube freak. So everything what has to do with meditation, religion, Buddhism, you know, I listen to. And then I listened to him because I never understood, I never was into yoga so much. And, you know, I know you mentioned before in your videos you knew about Kriya Yoga. And I was listening to Forrest videos, and I just had to go very quick to loads of videos because I just was attracted in a simple way, you know, with the resonance breath and with the baby meditation and with the opening the space. And what thing really impressed me, it was more in the body, which I never thought about because, well, you listen to a lot of meditation. I'm the type, when I listen to a meditation, I have to practice it directly. And usually, most probably, I'm not good at it because the postures might not be right. But I never really, I'm not sure that is right, I never really bored. I just had to try. When Ajahn Sumedho said something, oh, I have to try that. Or Thanissaro Bhikkhu, oh, I have to try that. Even I listened to Bhante William Erassi when he was still alive. Oh, I have to try this, you know, somehow. And so the same with Forrest. So I have to try that, and that was really impressive. And I bought the book directly. So I'm working on it because I didn't know so much about the yoga tradition, even if I knew about Yogananda and so on and so on. And so I'm working on to figure that out. What that is with the body, and when you do the breathing exercise, especially the Om, go into the Om Japa, and also then open the mind from Ted James. I know a lot about neuro-linguistic programming also because I read a lot of books about it, and I knew direct what timeline therapy was and so on. But I never saw the connections between all these things. So, well, I'm quite enthusiastic about it, and I'm working on it, and it makes a bit of a difference because I'm always struggling in Buddhism. I'm always struggling. There is Ajahn Sona, for example, who says, yes, modern mentality who says you fake it until it is there. And then you have Ajahn Sumedho saying, yeah, leave it as it is. And it is as it is. Both are the same, but you know, in your practice, in your mind, sometimes they're not much different, really, deep down. But sometimes in the approach, when you look at it, you know, also how you personally feel. So that was very, very interesting, and you know, I like your videos very much, and thank you to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, it is really, I think, a wonderful coming together that we have here. And I think it's absolutely perfectly aligned. And so the purpose of the Kriya and the purpose of the HRV resonance is to enter into that low idle state. And so that calming of the body reflects back on the mind, and the mind gets a little quieter. It gets a little easier to think straight. And that's the clarity that Patanjali is talking about, that this clarity should naturally arise, and we don't force it. You know, that's kind of the wrong end of the stick. You know, you're grabbing the baseball bat by the wrong end and you're like, why is this not working? And then you grab the baseball bat by the correct end and you control the body, you enter into this little bit of clarity, and then it makes it easy to meditate, right? And that's the whole point of yoga, that you can do that. And then the Om Japa is clearing the way so that you can roll up, your consciousness can rise up into the heart. And then, boom, ta-da, loving kindness. And we're perfectly aligned. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, ta-da, it's right there. It all happens as you rise up the spine into head back towards the brain.
I think Ulf has had his hand up for some.
Yeah, Ulf or Anka, is it you? Ulf stepped
Yeah,
away, it looks
I
like.
managed.
Oh, here we are. Good.
I have just one quick question. This yogi who went into the store and he got this card for free, but then he paid, like that, he's preventing the other person from being generous. So it would be also a nice trait to just take and be thankful instead of no. So I'm not sure about this.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Sometimes people give you something or give me something as a doctor, and I know they are very poor. They have almost nothing, and then they come and give me this flower, and I'm so touched, and it's I'm so touched from their generosity. So that's a nice thing too to take.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, I went to Ashok the first time my guru. I went to Ashok and I sat with him, and I was thinking to myself, is this guy going to be my guru? Is this going to work? How's this going to work out? Is this going to work out? I don't know. And I'm thinking about that in my head, and he read my mind, and he goes, my only job is to get you to the medulla. In other words, a roll up of consciousness, your consciousness rises back to the brain. And he said, that's the true guru. When you are at the feet, when you are in the medulla, and you are, the way he would say, you are Googling God, right? You're getting a download from the higher self. He said, now you are at the feet of the true guru. He says, it's not me. My job is just to get you there. That's it. And it was so beautiful and so clear. Right, that was my first meeting with him. And he said that to me. And I was so shocked because I'd never had anybody put it to me that quickly, that succinctly, and so internally. Like there was a pathway and we're going there, and that's it. That's all it is. It was so beautiful. And his point was, now once you reach that point, you are listening to the true guru. And so as we go through life and it's like, well, Lahiri did this and he did that and he did that, but what about me? Well, you have to listen to that true guru. And so I would totally agree with you that you're going to have those moments where you're going to like, oh, I just feel like I should just receive this. And so that's your intuition. Absolutely. So now you're listening to the true guru. So it's not about what Lahiri did, it's why he did it. He did it because in that moment, he felt as if, oh my God, I kind of feel like I'm taken from this guy and I want to give something back, even if it's just pennies. And it wasn't a lot, it was just pennies that he put down. And it was just his offering because that's where he felt it was in the moment and he felt it was correct. And from an outward point of view, his students said, no, sir, you're an old man. You don't know what you're doing. You're a yogi. You're internalized. You don't know what you're doing. Let me correct you. And he goes, no. I know what I'm doing. I have to do this now. And so he was following his intuition, and you're going to follow your intuition. And that's exactly as it should be.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I'm glad you brought this up for us because, you know, a lot of people get caught up in, a lot of students or practitioners get caught up in the technique itself. And this is something that I try to emphasize in my own talks, which is the inner guru, you know, the inner guidance system, which is essentially your intuition. You can call it, you know, God, you can call it the higher self, you can call it whatever word works for that particular person. But there is an intuition that happens. And the more we are in alignment with the intuition, the more synchronicities we also see. So I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, yeah, in Lahiri's situation, that might have been appropriate. But then we think about it and we say, well, for me, I want to be able to be generous or I want another person to express their generosity. So I'm allowing that process to happen. And every situation will be different depending upon your karma, depending upon your perspective, and depending upon the situation at hand. So no one action is universal for every situation. And that's where your intuition comes in. It will allow you to be spontaneous, you know, spontaneous in terms of in accordance to whatever situation you're in and whatever is appropriate for the people around and for yourself. So the technique, any technique that you're doing in terms of whether it's Kriya or when you're going through the jhanas, it's just to keep that left brain or the left part of the mind busy enough to appease it and say, okay, I'm doing something. And then once it starts to like be satisfied and it quiets down, then the real work begins, which is to listen to the intuition and be there. Don't do anything and allow the download to happen. Allow the process to go deeper on its own. The more you try to do in that moment, the less things are going to happen. And you just have to be there. Don't do anything.
Perfectly, beautifully said.
Beautiful. I think Dahlia has a question.
Thank you so much. I think this is a great opportunity for us, like Forrest students. We have been looking forward to make more profound questions other than the ones that we do at the census. I've been, my mind is lately like chasing me these questions, and I want you to see what you think about until this day with the experiences that you have had and all you know. What do you think is the purpose of life? Like, what have you been able to realize about what is the purpose of life? I mean, for both of you. That's my question.
That's from me?
Yes, for you.
Okay. Okay, great. What is the purpose of life? Well, it's really that hero's journey. And so meditation, so what the yogis were trying to do, I love this question, I get it every once in a while. So what's the deal with the samadhi, Forrest? Why are these yogis all about the samadhi? Samadhi. What is the samadhi? Why are we going for the samadhi? I don't understand. I'm ready. Let's go for the samadhi, but why are we going for the samadhi? And I love that. And so the reason that the yogis are trying to go into the samadhi is to realize what you truly are. And so you take your past, you take your present, you take your future, you take the world, you take your job, you take all your responsibilities, you take everything that you know and you delete it. Just Control, Alt, delete all of that, put it in the trash bin. What's left? What's kind of a blank screen, isn't it? It's kind of, I'm just here and I'm the seer. I am the watcher. And that's why they call a yogi who goes very, very deep, they say he is a seer because he has seen this, that he is only that. And that's the samadhi. It's the deletion of everything else and you enter into everything is just a one. And that's the non-dual state, right? And so then you know, oh my God, all this other stuff, like Delson was saying, I came out of the near-death experience and I'm like, you're fake and that is fake and this world is fake. And I love that. And that is exactly what the samadhi, that's the kind of learning that the samadhi is giving you as well. Or just a really deep, deep state you start to figure out, you start to get a taste of that. And that's the whole purpose. So what is the purpose of life? To figure out that you are that. That's the true hero's journey. And so another way to say that along the way is to say, well, life is all about learning. And that was one of my early lessons from my mother, that life is about learning. And I went into the ashram and I met Brother Bimalananda, and all the monks were kind of cranky. All of the monks were kind of a disappointment, especially in the morning. And I thought that was so weird because I had put them all up on pedestals and they were falling off of it constantly. But Brother Bimalananda was just simple and humble and sweet and caring. And it was 100% of the time. And I finally came up to him because I developed a relationship with him. I'm like, brother, what is your secret? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, everybody else is cranky in the morning. Everybody else is short. Everybody else has a temper. What is your secret? And he laughed and he goes, well, maybe they had a bad meditation. I'm like, no, you got to tell me, what is the secret? And he looked at me and he goes, never stop learning. And my mind just like, I don't know, it was like he was writing it on my soul. And I was like, here, write it on my soul. I'm ready. And I just love it. to me, that's what life is about. Life is about learning. So what are we learning? The true hero's journey, this internal journey into, it's not about the non-dual state. It's not about the samadhi label. It's about knowing what you truly are, developing that relationship with your superconscious mind, with the higher self, getting to know that as much as you possibly can. That's what life is really all about. And then you're doing the universe in reverse. So the universe has spit you out. The divine you as the divine decided to spit yourself out. And now you're coming back. So it's the same thing that went out is going straight back. And that's the real hero's journey.
Sorry, I muted you, Dahlia, just because there was some background noise there. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, sorry, it was my son that came in. Thank you so much. But now that you have, Forrest, that you have realized that, and you have had like many samadhis, and you have traveled that journey, what stage are you at right now? I mean, I'm looking at you as a reference, but I know it's hard, but
yeah. For me, the journey now is to stay. Well, to me, it's more and more, the thing that I concentrate more and more when I'm teaching is absorption, and well, the process up to absorption and absorption itself, and don't worry so much about samadhi. So that's a process that I'm going through in my teaching, is learning to emphasize the absorption and what that actually means. So there's a moment that the conscious mind brainwave, it merges up with the superconscious mind. And when that happens, for me, when it happens, there's a feeling to it. And it's as if my conscious mind, what I say is me, gets out of the way, and it becomes an empty cup. And then into that cup, it's filled up with the divine. And so my current thing is to just do that over and over again, as much as I can. Just get myself out of the way, allow the cup to be filled, and just be in that state and kind of marinate in that state. And that's, now there's this part in the Mahabharata that I adore, where the Pandavas, which are your chakras, right? You're walking up your chakras, and the Pandava brothers are walking up into the mountains, and one brother is absorbed into the next brother. And so you're left with just the throat chakra, and he's standing at the door of heaven, and he knocks, and they're like, oh, come on in, but leave your dog. And he's like, oh my God, I lost my brothers. I lost my wife. I lost everybody. And the dog's still here. You think I'm going to abandon the dog? Are you crazy? And they're like, you have passed the last test. Ta-da! And the dog becomes Vishnu. And now here, this is interesting. This happens before the samadhi. He has not walked into heaven. He's not in the non-dual state just yet. So the dog becomes Vishnu. This is the moment I'm talking about. The beta brainwave gets out of the way, and the cup becomes filled with the divine. And that's the crux of the entire, to me, that's the crux of the entire story right there. And so that's something I'm playing with right now, doing that over and over. And another way that translates, absolutely. And another way that translates is, through love for your kids. So you can feel some of that love, which is the oneness again. You're feeling that.
Beautiful. Thanks very much, Forrest. So we are coming up to the 90-minute mark in about 3 minutes, and I'm not sure how people's time is. We do have time, perhaps. We have three questions still in the pipe here. So Quilly, maybe we'll hand it to you next.
So this is just a foundational question, but I think it's really a core. Rather than looking at either of you as, you came in and you didn't have any problems, what I would observe is that you were curious about whatever was happening. Maybe in your early youth it was more staccato, but now it's hard to miss the curiosity that you experience everything with. And that also is where I live, and I can look at my own hero's journey there and how I work with a lot of other people. And also it's not just for other people, because there's places where things are totally annoying and it's like 5 hours later before I even notice that. So how to increase that curiosity in myself and other. And I'd love to hear what both of you have to say.
Shall I start?
Go
So
ahead,
I'll
please.
get, I guess I'll start. And well, that's beautiful. Well, first of all, just having the intention, right? Just having that intention of I'm going to be curious. And I remember one of the monks when I was in the ashram, he wrote out on a stick-it note, he wrote, do one thing at a time. And then he put it up on his wall, and then he wrote, do one thing at a time. And he had like 20 or 30 or 40 little stick-it notes just to drill it into his brain. I'm going to do one thing at a time. So if you just put up on your mirror curiosity, and then you put it somewhere else and you put these little notes, that can be a fun little way to make yourself some spiritual reminders. But the very process of meditation that we're jumping into is lowering everything. So it's lowering all of the distraction, and that you enter into a little bit of that clarity, which Patanjali spoke about, right? That clarity that arises. And it's that clarity which allows you to notice. And this is kind of nice to know that you're going to notice more things because of that, right? So the clarity is what gives you the ability to notice, and we're noticing more and more subtle things. And sometimes as yogis, we get into this wrong idea that we need a big experience to slap us across the face. And I think maybe the Buddhists are even better at noticing, oh, this is going to be subtle. In fact, it's going to be nothing. I think Buddhism is even a little bit better at that.
Thank you, Delson.
So curiosity, I mean, when you think about curiosity, we use that as a enlightenment factor for those of you who know about the 7 awakening factors. And curiosity can be, as Forrest said, very, 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 very subtle. And you can just make it into a game. Like if you treat life like a game and be like, oh, I screwed up there. That's okay. That's fine. But I'll do better next time, and chalk it up to like, okay, that's another learning experience. But the openness that we have, it's again balancing that left brain, right brain in that sense, right? Because the left brain is always like analytical. It wants to understand everything. It wants to rationalize everything. But life is such that you can't always rationalize it because it's a very limited perspective. If we treat life like a game and we start to like say, okay, all of these moments that we're experiencing are just episodes that we have to go through, and we engage with life in that way, then it's the same as I would have said in the meditation, where you treat every meditation as a new episode of a new television show that you're watching. And it's like you don't know what's going to come up. And the excitement of that in itself, like you don't know what's going to come up. The idea that, okay, I got upset and I'm thinking about it now 5 hours later, that's another experience as well. You can look at that experience and be like, okay, why am I experiencing this right now? Am I able to actually let it go? Or do I still want to hold on to it? That time has already passed and there's nothing we can do about that time. But everything that we can do is in the present moment. So if we continue to remain present and aware of whatever is happening right here, right now, that in itself is an attitude of curiosity. That in itself is an attitude of interest in life. I think if we make it too black and white, like it has to be this way or it has to be that way, that's another kind of rationalization. That's I use that word masturbation right? Masturbation comes from the word that Albert Ellis came up with, which is, I must do this. I should do this. It has to be that way, right? And that creates conflict in myself. It creates conflict with the world around me. And it's like, if things don't go the way that I want them to go, then I get upset. But if I keep the mind open, if I keep the mind saying like, okay, anything can happen, you live in a life where there's all possibilities present, you know, and being in that space requires you to really quieten down that sort of analytical should, must, have to kind of mind. And it's like, okay, I'm open. I'm right here. And because you're open and you're right there, when something, you know, unwholesome comes up, when something comes up that makes you feel like anger or makes you feel, you know, frustration, or makes you feel, you know, upset, or whatever it is, or makes you feel bored, makes you feel tired, makes you feel in grief, observe it, acknowledge it. You know, the first step of the 6 R's is to recognize, and that means to just acknowledge that it's over there, but we don't gloss over it. We allow it to be there, and we gently just let that go. We say, okay, I see you, I acknowledge you, and I'm going to relax back into whatever is happening right now. You know, and that's how you keep your life like a game. I mean, if you really have that attitude that life is a game, there's some amazing magical moments that you'll experience.
Well, thank you both, and I appreciate the you know, I am in the game. I am in the game. I'm also in a position where you know, people come to me and they want to get rid of their anxiety, you know, or they're not interested in learning about something. A woman said that to me just the other day. I don't want to know about it. I just want to do it, you know. So it's, how can I bend that? Like, you must have that same kind of a frustration with us when you see, if she would just go like that. So, you know, that's part of my.
I will say about this, you know, as a teacher, or as a guide, or as a fellow spiritual traveler, we're all on our journey, and that's the attitude to have as teachers, which is like, okay, I might know something that I can tell you, and as much as I tell you what you might want to use, it's like going back to that sutta. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you know, there's that story of a man who comes to the Buddha and he says, you know, you're awakened and you have all of these students who are awakened, but some of them, when they listen to you, they don't seem to follow. They don't seem to get any kind of insight. They don't seem to make any kind of progress. And the Buddha gives that analogy. He says, okay, suppose there were two people going to this place, Rajagaha. And one man goes to a person who knows the way to Rajagaha, and he asks him, how do I get to Rajagaha? Says, you go this way, make a right here. When you see the tree stump, make a left, and so on. So the first man, he goes, and he doesn't follow the instructions, and he doesn't make it to Rajagaha. The second man, he immediately remembers all of the instructions that are there, and he gets there. So, you know, the Buddha says, okay, so, you know, what should the man do about the first guy if he's not following instructions? And the man says, well, what can he do? You know, he can only tell him how to do it, but he must walk the path. So there have been situations where Bhante would tell me, Bhante Maramsi, where he would be telling a student a particular insight many times, many dozens of times, many hundreds of times. And then one day the student gets it. And then he comes to the retreat, or he comes to interview with him, and the student gives him that same insight to Bhante. And Bhante, all he does is, yeah, that's great. You know, what else can you do? You know, that's the patience. I mean, to be a teacher, you need infinite patience. And you need to be able to just let the student work their self out.
Thank you, Delson. Thank you, Forrest.
Thank you. And Pasindu is next, I believe.
Dear teachers, I would like to know, my question is about meditation. Is it possible to achieve success by doing Vipassana meditation along without Samadhi meditation? I would like to your opinion.
Okay, so when it comes to Vipassana and Samatha, so Vipassana essentially means insight, and Samatha means calm clarity, or that's how I would say it, serenity. And there are four ways to get to this experience according to the suttas. One is, first you have Samatha, which is you have a mind that is very calm, very clear, very collected. And what follows suit is the Vipassana, the insights that arise. The second way is to start with a process of looking at how this mind works, and as a result of which the mind gets collected. And the third is to have them both in tandem. They're connected together. So this is Samatha Vipassana. That's what the twin process is. Tranquil wisdom, insight, meditation is Samatha Vipassana, where you're doing, as the Kriya yogis would know, do, right? You're doing something and then you're just being there, and then you're doing something and then you're just being there, and there's a balance that happens. That's the third way. The fourth way the Buddha talks about, or it's mentioned in the Pali Canon, is agitation about the Dhamma. And this is a very rare thing. This has happened to Ananda, where he had to go to the council of awakened beings after the Buddha passed on, entered parinibbana. And they said, in order for you to be part of this council, you need to be fully enlightened. And it's coming up shortly, the meeting. So, hurry it up. So Ananda walked around, paced himself, trying to figure out how he can, become enlightened. What does he need to do? He looked into the teachings. He remembered, he had a photographic memory. He remembered all of the teachings of the Buddha. And indeed, in the Pali Canon, it says, thus have I heard. Thus have I heard is Ananda speaking about what the Buddha did. That's how it starts in every sutta. And eventually he was agitated. Eventually he just completely let go. And as he said, you know what, I'll just let go. And he, as just before his head hit the pillow, his mind understood and it was liberated. And the story goes is that the next day he came levitating down into the council, and they said, you have done it. Welcome. Now you can be part of the council. So there are different ways, and it depends upon your inclination, how you want to do this practice. But there is something to be said about this. First and foremost, trying too hard, making an effort in such a way that you cause tension and tightness in your mind and body is not the way. In all four cases, it's about relaxing. Even when Ananda was agitated, what did he realize? He realized, if I just let go, if I just relax, and that allowed him to get that liberating insight. So it's about keeping a practice which isn't so analytical and so like gung-ho. It's about relaxing into it and experiencing things as and when they come.
Much merits to you. Much merits to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ryan is next.
Thank you. I just had a quick question reflecting on the experiences that you guys share. We all go through difficult and adverse experiences in our childhood and growing up that can kind of condition us. And I'm curious to the extent that you guys feel that the spiritual traditions can address those issues that deal with the childhood traumas and difficulties that we experience. Just reflecting on my own path, diving deep into spirituality and realizing, wow, I've bypassed or missed some really important things on my journey in healing this humanness or personality that I have along with my soul or spirit. So how do you guys address that in your own practices, or how have you experienced that on your own journey, addressing that human personality and those kind of traumas that we all inevitably deal with, and how to what extent the spiritual path can and can't deal with that, and how we can integrate other practices at the same time.
I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful question. And a lot of times we're looking to a spiritual practice to be the end all be all. And with Kriya, I think it's one of the most complete systems on the face of the planet. That's why I love it so much, especially under Ashokji and understanding the importance of the Om Japa in the chakras, which is a therapy, and it's cleaning you out slowly. And the Navi Kriya is cleaning out the fear slowly. And yet we might still feel like, well, that's not answering everything. And so how can we get rid of some of this childhood trauma? Well, when I'm teaching, I offer, maybe you might like to try Huna. Huna has a lot of deep and profound, very shamanic type understandings. So sometimes, you might have this anger. And so Huna says, well, beat the clay and put all that anger into the clay, and then go put it into the water and watch it dissolve. Right? Or they will take a fire, and then they'll say, write down all these things that you're angry about, or whatever it is, whatever trouble you have. And then you put it into the fire. And then you want to feel the ash, you want to smell the smoke, you want to really feel as if those things are burned up. And this is speaking to the subconscious. And that's really what the Om Japa is trying to do. It's trying to clean out the subconscious. And especially in the lower three chakras, we're really trying to clean that out. But these other processes have their place. And so at the end of the day, the answer is whatever way you can get into it. If you have to go into heaven backwards, by God, go into heaven backwards. And so whatever works for you, if it's talking to a friend, if it's talking to somebody that you trust, if it's talking to a therapist, if it's doing Huna, if it's doing timeline therapy, if it's doing the Om Japa, hallelujah, whatever works, whatever in that moment is helping you the very most. And then if it's not working, then try something else and just kind of float around and see which one is really going to help me the most. And all of these, you're trying to wrap your mind around what happened, become okay with it, and let it go and move on past it. And that's getting the learning. It's the learning which will always set you free. And it might be very subtle. It might be a little bit subconscious. It might be very simple. And you might go, well, that's not big enough. No, if it's the learning, it's the learning, and the learning allows you to let it go. So if you feel yourself letting go, then you've done it. That process is working. But so whatever works. And sometimes coming at things from, oh, I have to do it through Kriya Yoga, or, I have to do it through this. And you come at it through a different angle, and suddenly everything works, and you go, oh my God, this is awesome. Sometimes just, sometimes you can do the Om Japa with a different holy name, and just coming at it from a different angle with new inspiration will change everything. And so coming at your own therapy from different angles can be very powerful.
Thank you, Forrest.
Absolutely. I don't know if Delson wants to add anything.
Yeah, Delson, do you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just say that, what Forrest said, I mean, we have to understand that when we do anybody does spiritual practices, I believe they do it, some might do it out of curiosity, but I think the majority of people do it because of some kind of suffering. And so we all come to some kind of therapy or some kind of spiritual practice or some kind of process because we want to come out of that suffering. And it's a noble search that we go through. And this process of looking for something out of the trauma is one aspect. But we have to realize that even if we have come to a level of understanding, come to a certain level of high attainment or insight, that doesn't mean that the work that needs to be done with regards to the subconscious material or the traumatic episodes has gone away. You will know that it's gone. It doesn't go away, by the way. It never goes away. what happens is you learn how to reframe your perspective on it. In other words, the memory of the traumatic experiences no longer have that emotional pull that they had before, right? So you could use, as Forrest said, Kriya therapy. You could use the Om Japa. You can use the Huna. You can use the forgiveness practice that was developed by Bhante Ramsi, where you're going deep into the heart and you're saying, I forgive myself for not understanding. And your subconscious will bring up things that you have held down with regards to guilt or resentment towards another person, or feeling that you need forgiveness from another person. So it starts that process of cleansing the heart center. And you'll know that you're done with it, so to speak, at least in that moment, if not for a long time or forever, if that happens, is that whenever you have that experience again, in terms of the memory, there's no longer this reactivity. There's no longer this tightening. There's no longer this like hatred or resentment or guilt. And so we continue to practice. We continue to fulfill our practice of loving kindness, our practice of joy, our practice of compassion, our practice of equanimity, until we've perfected it. And we know we've perfected it in that moment. There will be other situations that will continue to challenge us. There will be other things from the subconscious that will continue to challenge us. And that's the thing about life. I want to echo that you never stop learning. Even though you've gotten to some high stages of understanding, you still have to deal with this human life. And that's the process of integration, right? Even if there's a process that works for you and you've gotten great benefit of it, there might be other things that need to be looked at, and you have to see what works for you. It can be talk therapy. It can be some kind of shamanistic ritual. It can be, fasting. It can be whatever seems to work for you. Not one size fits all here.
Thank you. I saw there's a question in the chat. What was the forgiving practice which Delson has just mentioned?
The forgiveness practice, very simply put, is essentially you come into your heart and you say to yourself in your mind, I forgive myself for not understanding. You say that a few times and you just wait and see what comes up. And something might come up in your memory that you might have done that you feel guilty about, or somebody will come that you feel resentment towards. And so you direct that towards them and you say, I forgive you for not understanding. And you say that a few times and you feel this acceptance of them in that moment. You feel the forgiveness towards them in that moment. And what this does is it's a very cathartic process. You will cry, you will have tears. Tears are very good, tears of joy or tears of grief or tears of whatever it is. It is such a great release where you feel immense relief afterwards. So the instructions are there in the link. I think Virgil's just sent them, but that's the instructions in brief. And you can do this, once a day. You can do this twice a day. You can also do a walking forgiveness practice. So it's all there in the material.
Thank you very much. We're coming up to 2 hours, and I'm sort of going to take advantage of my position to be able to ask one more question, which is
Love it.
Which is, I would like to ask each of you, what is it that inspires you the most right now? After all these years of practice, after all these years of teaching, what is it that inspires you, at least at the moment? Maybe we could start with you, Forrest.
Sure. So I was doing, I've got that website and I'm doing trainings and I'm putting together the third training, and you can actually watch it in the third training. So I'm in the third training and I'm like, well, look, it's really simple. It's really just 3 things. And I'm kind of watching myself as I'm teaching, right? And I'm like, oh my God, it's only 3 things. And it just kind of, my mind just kind of melted and fell on the floor, and I got a dustpan and I scooped it up. And I'm like, oh my God, from the beginning of Kriya to the end of Kriya, from the beginning of the spiritual path to the end of the spiritual path, it's really just 3 things. And the simplicity of that, to this day, it just sets my hair on fire. And so it's really just the dorsal vagal complex, which is so the yogis know this as the spine. They say the spine, the spine, the spine, the spine. Why are they going on and on about the spine? Well, that's the dorsal vagal complex, which creates the low idle state inside of the yogi. And so we're using that primarily with the pranayama, with the long breathing, and we're doing that with the Om Japa and the chakras. And so that allows for this rise of consciousness, right? And so when the consciousness rises, where's it going? What is it? Not what is the cause of the spiritual experiences? I'm not saying that. I'm saying the brain is using these parts when you're in a spiritual experience. And so it's using the left amygdala, which is bliss, and it's using the right hippocampus primarily, which is expansion and the state of knowing. And so those three things, that's it, all the way into the samadhi, into the absorption, into the samadhi, all of that. It's just those three things. That's it. And when that settled in me in that training, I fell apart. I couldn't do the training for a couple of days. I'm like, oh my God, so huge. And so that's really inspiring to me, that it's really, it gets quite complex. And if you try and, here's a fun thing. It's like, why is it written so complex? Like all these different paths, they have these really, really complex things. Why is it so complex sometimes? And maybe you live in it so long, it becomes a little bit more simple over time, right? But still, it's very complex. But then have you ever tried to write out how to tie your shoes? This is a fun experiment. Just try and write to yourself, how do you, like, as if you're talking to someone that never tied their shoes, could you write that out in an easy way? And you won't be able to. It's just, oh my God, how do we, because you got to flip it and all these turns and twists. But really, it's very, very quite simple and straightforward. You just tie your shoes. We just tie our shoes. We don't think about it, right? But anything that you try and explain with language is going to be very, very complex. But Kriya in its heart, or the whole meditative path, the hero's journey that we're talking about today, it's really just those three things.
Your enthusiasm is contagious. Thank you very much, Forrest. And
Thank you.
Delson, what inspires you?
That's a very interesting question, because it's always changing. But in this moment, or for these last few days or weeks or months, I've had a chance to reflect on the last 3 years of my teaching life, because I took a year off, kind of working on a book and just going to the mountains and meditating. And it really helped me kind of consider, why did I start this process in the first place? And I realized it wasn't something that I initiated myself. It was because of other people who said, why don't you start teaching? Why don't you start telling your story and talk about your experiences and help others go through that experience? And so when I reflect back on that, that really sets everything else in alignment. Like, what is it that we're doing here? At least what is it that I'm doing here as a teacher? And it's really giving back. And it's not like I've achieved some perfection or something like that, but it's always about being able to give back in some way. I was having this conversation with John, our mutual friend, Callan, yesterday, and we were talking about this, and he was saying, once you have everything in life, like you've gotten the best of the best, and you're materially successful, you have a great relationship with everyone around you, you have a great set of friends, and all of that. At the end of the day, what would you do? What would you do? And immediately it came back was, you would give back. You would give back. So, I'm always inspired to do that now, is whatever little I have in terms of the information, knowledge, whatever little wisdom that I have, I can give back. My teaching moving forward is going to reflect that as well, because I want to be able to show people that essentially you too can give back. We're not here as teachers, at least I say for myself, but I think Forrest might agree on this, is we're not on a pedestal. We're not above you guys. We're not trying to say, this is what you do. we are just reflecting what you're giving back to us, right? And for me, it feels like this exchange of compassion and wisdom, and it's an exchange of energy, and it's a process that we're all going through, and that's why I call everybody my fellow spiritual travelers. And so, what really inspires me is the connection that I have with people. I have met thousands of people at this point in the last 3 years of doing all kinds of retreats and interviews in those retreats. And I see that the universal sort of human condition, it is universal, right? And the more I see that, the more I realize that, yeah, I mean, my pains, my hurts, my traumas, my griefs, they are present in everybody. And that evokes that compassion out of you, that natural compassion, the realization and the recognition of one's own mistakes, but one's own vulnerabilities, right? So as teachers, as guides, we're there to reflect that, and we're there to help you. That's really what inspires.
Thank you very much. That is very inspiring. So we're just coming up to the 2-hour mark now. That perfect timing. And so I just want to thank both of you, Forrest and Delson, for taking part in this wonderful first episode of the 7-part series. And we'll be back next week at the same time. And the topic will be neuroscience and meditation, which should promise us to be a very interesting conversation. So thank you so much. This is being recorded. Hopefully it was recorded successfully, and we'll be making that available shortly. So thanks so much to everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night, morning, whatever it is for you, wherever you are. And thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Thank you.